Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Hello and welcome to the Raben Report's Season 8 premiere. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, and with me for the first time this season is pretty much my new expert panel, Amara, Samuel, and Jordan. How are you guys?
Good.
Great.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Good to be back.
Excited.
Yeah, it's been a crazy morning, but that's what happens when you have a season premiere. Before we begin, all opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. So we've got some big news this season, starting, of course, with our new panelist, Jordan Pines. Jordan, tell us about yourself.
Hi, super excited to be on the show. My name is Jordan Pines. I'm a fourth-year politics and governance student here at Ryerson. A little bit about myself. I'm openly gay. I have been since I was in grade 10. I would say politically I lean more NDP, but I would say I have some more liberal tendencies. I do a bit of stand-up comedy on the side. I actually had the pleasure last year of being named one of CBC Comedy's top 10 amateurs in stand-up in 2019 with CBC Next Up. That was awesome. And I guess the last thing about me is that I love more than anything else reality TV, as I have bothered the panel with during most of our meetings. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be on the show.
Awesome, and we are so happy to have you. You're definitely going to bring a new perspective to the show, and that's what we love.
Looking forward to it.
So the other piece of good news is that we are now available everywhere. So did you miss the Raben Report's live show? No problem. Now you can catch up on all past episodes on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and of course, Spotify. Of course, you'll only be able to see our live expressions and reactions, facial features over here on Facebook, and little clips on Instagram. But if you're driving to school, doing some homework, doing some other work, now you can listen to us anywhere. Now, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll be talking about our main topic, which is the coronavirus. But first, let's take a look at our weekly recap, starting with Ryerson severing ties with the RSU. Amara, I know you're a big fan of this story, so let's give it to you. What do you think?
I'm not bothered by it at all. I think that a student government is important, but the RSU has had many scandals in the time I've been at Ryerson. Obviously the big scandal with Raben, but also this year there's been scandals with money as well, and I think it's clear that something needs to change, and I'm not bothered by that. They're spending our money. So.
I could not agree with you more. I think what the Ryerson Student Union has proven time and time again is as giving students complete access to funds with no supervision whatsoever is only going to lead to a misuse of funds and most of what we've seen so far, which is a lot of stuff happening under the table, very shady stuff that, you know, if you are going to have a student union, you want transparency. You want you want to be able to see what they're doing with your money, and the RSU showed they're not responsible with it, and I don't blame Ryerson at all for what they're doing. And
considering how much money they have access to, and the fact and the low participation in terms of voting and running, something needs to change, clearly.
Could not agree more.
I was a pretty vocal critic of the RSU as well on Facebook, which got me a lot of flack, but I guess I'm proven right. But even I was surprised about the announcement that they were just completely severing ties, really, on a dime. They waited right until the announcement that they were launching a police investigation, the RSU's announcement, and then I think was it even a day?
I think, yeah, within a day.
They canceled the contract.
And their RSU's suing Ryerson with our money.
Million?
Our money.
So, the RSU doesn't really have a leg to stand on, a fair leg to stand on, because they're upset that Ryerson left, and now they're suing for Ryerson breaking an agreement, even though they broken
And-
agreement with the students, and they're using our
Of
money.
course. And Ryerson, it's not like Ryerson doesn't want there to be a student union. They've encouraged students to form a new one, and we're, I think, voting for the way that we want the new student government to work. So they clearly do support the idea of student government, but the current RSU is just insanely corrupt, and I don't know how anybody could really argue against that.
I really think that the best way to move forward is definitely forming a new student government, because I think student activism and student government making decisions for the students is incredibly important. But I just think, these are still students. It needs some sort of supervision element, whether it's a professor or a volunteer or some type of adult figure with some experience who can come in and provide some sort of just some oversight to make sure things are run properly. I think that's what's needed to start a new RSU and make it a lot better.
Yeah, Sam?
I'm just something mentioned to viewers. Whenever you see someone carrying water for RSU online, usually on Facebook, if you look at their profiles, they're almost always employed by the RSU or tangentially, working for them. Just a thought.
People saying positive stuff about them online.
Yeah.
Like those are the ones. It basically reminds you of those like Amazon company like Twitter pages that are like, I love working for
exactly.
Amazon. I'm very happy. And then they're always some sort of corporate person for it.
It just makes sense. If you're not benefiting from the RSU, if you don't work for them, I haven't met anybody who has a favorable opinion of the RSU that doesn't work for them.
The question I have with Ryerson severing ties is what happens to all the money that we've given to the RSU so far? Do we get that back? Do we have to continue paying fees to them yearly? Or like, I'm confused.
Well, I am sure we'll have to pay, or not us because we're graduating, but students will still have to pay fees to the new RSU. But I'm not sure what's going to happen to the money that the RSU has currently, because
Yeah, I'd love my money back.
It'd be nice to
personally.
sort of like a little like paycheck for all the students, a little check in the mail.
Come on, guys, show your goodwill. Give us the money back. I thought
Ram
you cared about
Ganesh
us.
got, a lot of money.
A lot of money.
We should get the money that we paid back.
It's just unfathomable. How do you spend $750,000 just within a couple months?
That's a lot of money.
Right? Like,
I
when you
don't
think
know.
about it, it's so much money. It's
And how
anyway.
did nothing what is the limit on the credit card? Like nothing, there were no red flags raised with that much money. It's almost $1 million.
I think it's also hilarious
Ridiculous.
that he went to debt consolidation and used that same money to pay for the debt consolidation. It's a mess. Ryerson's student union is a mess, and I would agree with all of you that it's great that we severed ties with the RSU. Now let's move on to our next story, which is the continuation of Trump's impeachment trial. At this point, really, everybody's sick and tired of talking about Trump, but we do have to mention it because it is in the news. So what do you guys think? Is he going to be acquitted? How long is this going to go for? What are your takes?
So the House impeached him, but the Senate has to vote to remove him from office. I mean, as far as I know, the Senate is majority Republican.
They're
so
not gonna
I don't think
impeach him,
they're going to remove him from office. But I mean, from the information that's out there, it definitely seems like he's done what he's been accused of, and as far as I know, that's an impeachable offense. So unfortunately, the partisanship of American politics is going to make it so that another president gets away with committing a crime because he's the president, which is pretty undemocratic and unequal and violates the rule of law. So
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that, I think one way or another, this is going to set a gross precedent, either in the sense that there's going to be some sort of retribution for this, which I don't think there will be, because if Trump was going to do something that truly bothered the Republicans in the Senate, I think it would have happened already. I can't see what he could do now that's worse that would make them be like, oh, we need to get this guy out of office. Like, I think Republicans have said that they don't care if he breaks the law. They don't care if he goes against his oath as president. I may have just made that up, but basically, and if he does get fined, like they do go through with the impeachment, I hope that it will create a further precedent, not president. I hope it will create a further precedent that presidents can't get away with doing whatever they want because they're the president. But I don't think it's realistic that anything's going to happen.
politics is a team sport nowadays, unfortunately.
I think there's just a general fatigue with the removal of Trump from office, maybe on even both aisles, but definitely along the right in the U.S. Not even the impeachment. Let's completely ignore the whole Russia investigation that went on for a year and a half. But I'm talking about even the obstruction of his executive orders by federal courts, or maybe not executive orders, but the things he was proposing. So I think people are just tired of it, and they want progress, and they want his agenda to be pushed forward. He's not going to be impeached in the Senate. He has like a 90+ approval rating. Any Republican senator that goes against him will lose his or her seat. So not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's unsurprising that Republicans and right-wingers don't want him to be impeached. because he's a Republican and he has a right-wing agenda. But I think it's just unfortunate that, the law doesn't really matter anymore when it comes to politics. No one's supposed to be above the law in a democratic society.
Here's my question about this, and I don't fully understand this, so if one of you could enlighten me on this. If they do go fully through with the articles of impeachment and fully remove him from office, can he still run in the 2020 election?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I would
I
assume
think so.
no.
No?
I don't think a president who's been impeached can run again, like who's been removed from office, because he has
Right.
been impeached, but I'm not completely sure about that.
Because I think he's the Republicans' best chance of winning again in 2020, which is awful, but it's not going to happen. You know what I mean?
I agree.
So I think that if he cannot run, like, they're definitely not going to remove him from office already, but if it means that he can't run if this happens, then there's even less of a chance.
I know what you mean.
Like less than 0. I have no idea.
Yeah, we're obviously going to have to see what happens. How the trial goes for another couple days, one day.
I'm not sure.
I feel like it's been going on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of issues with like obstruction of witnesses and evidence and stuff like that. So
Well, at the Raben Report, we're going to keep updated about it, and we're going to keep you updated about it. But let's move on to our final story, which is Holocaust Memorial Day, 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. It was a very somber but important day. Many world leaders from many countries gathered at Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, and they had a ceremony there. With the rise of anti-Semitism now, what can we do? Even on the day of Holocaust Remembrance Day, there was a synagogue defaced in Finland. There were attacks on other people, on Jewish people. So what can we do? Because clearly there's a rise, and Holocaust survivors are saying that they're worried about it. Jordan, what do you think?
Not to relate everything back to Trump, but I do think this has a little bit to do with it, especially the fact that people have realized in recent years that they can commit acts of hatred in broad public daylight and almost essentially get away with it, except for a few people on the internet being upset about it. So I think that as people see this general hate rise in society, because I believe if people have been anti-Semitic and showing these opinions, this isn't new. They've always had these opinions. This is just them now realizing they are allowed to say it now and they can't get in trouble for it, which is almost ironic in a world that we're having to police more and more of what we're saying about free speech and how we're able to talk to people, that people say like, we can't say anything now, but no, people are still getting away with saying whatever they want, doing whatever they want, no matter what group it puts at risk.
yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's interesting that there's, people are complaining more and more about political correctness, but it seems that forms of racism that we thought we got rid of are also rising. I think that's interesting. And we're all Canadian and all have gone through the education system, and we know about how the world kind of treated Jewish people during the Holocaust, and I guess the regret and the guilt that a lot of Western countries carry. And I think it's interesting, especially considering what's going on with like Muslims in China. We've definitely heard about that. During the Holocaust, it was a lot more difficult, obviously, for information to be spread. And we have firsthand reports of Muslims in China being treated very similarly. And it's unfortunate that it seems like the Western world is going to once again ignore atrocities committed by other countries against religious minorities.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's... honestly, I'm at a loss of what to do because, obviously for me and Jordan, it's personal, being Jewish. But obviously people of other minorities and other groups can understand racism and the feelings experienced. So I just hope that we can have a better future and we can learn from the mistakes of the past. But now to our main story, the coronavirus. According to WebMD, the coronavirus is a kind of virus that causes an infection in your nose, sinuses, or upper throat. Generally, coronaviruses are not dangerous. Most spread the same way other cold-causing viruses do, through infected people coughing and sneezing, by touching an infected person's hands or face, or by touching things such as doorknobs that infected people have touched. In the U.S., coronaviruses are more common in the fall and winter, but anyone can come down with a coronavirus infection at any time. Some types of coronaviruses, though, are serious. In 2003, 774 people died from a severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, outbreak, with a huge portion in Toronto. In early 2020, following a December 2019 outbreak in China, the World Health Organization identified a new type 2019 novel coronavirus. This strain of the coronavirus is believed to have originated from a wet market in Wuhan, China, and the belief is that the virus may have jumped from the animals to humans. Wet markets are places animals, both dead and alive, are sold in closed capacity. Having now spread to over 15 countries, there is a growing concern around the globe that this virus will be out of control. When the Chinese government claimed that there were approximately 1,000 confirmed cases, a whistleblower nurse posted a video alleging that there were 90,000 confirmed cases. Pictures and videos circulating the media showed the area of Wuhan like a ghost town. 60 million people are under lockdown, and a hospital is being built as we speak to accommodate the rising amount of infected people. There's a lot of anxiety and confusion surrounding the issue, and on today's show, we'll try to get to the bottom of things. As a reminder, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed to have your thoughts read live on air. Guys, are we in danger?
No.
Not even a little bit.
Potentially.
We're
But
always
I don't-
potentially in danger, though.
Yeah, no shit.
Well, I think
So, of course, if
When
it's
you-
obvious, then
when you
it's
say are
obvious.
we in danger, like we as Canadians, no. I'm sure there are people who are in danger because it's obviously affecting some people, but I believe in this scenario, the outcry is worse than the actual disease.
Is the human race in danger? Is this another plague? I don't think so.
I doubt it.
Well, I read this thing that it was 1920 had a plague. Or sorry, 1820 had a plague, 1920 had a plague, and now it's 2020.
I correlation does not equal
Dun,
causation.
Well, Sam, let's focus on why you think there is a problem. Why are we in danger?
Sure, there's a couple things. One is the speed that the drastic measures that the Chinese government took, which you could attribute to them trying to save face with the outbreak of the SARS virus in the past, and they don't want a repeat of that. But the measures they took, I saw online, were very drastic. They amounted to, I remember seeing, they dumped, after the containment, they dropped dump trucks of dirt on the major highways to block vehicle traffic. And to me, that seemed like a very effective but very haphazard and kind of last minute thinking, which kind of lends to the idea that there might be some kind of general confusion or crises behind the scenes in the government there. Also, I'd like to point out, it's almost, would you say 60 million is the number of people quarantined?
Yeah, 60 million.
That's an extremely large number. That's double the population of Canada. And you have to think about that. It is in a smaller area, but that's a huge amount of people. Also, the deadliness of this particular strain of coronavirus is magnitudes more deadly than the common influenza virus that we see, is mentioned a lot. Oh, it kills so many more people. That's true. But the potential is there, like the potential for anything, but it still has to be understood and has to be mitigated, like you mitigate risk. So that's why. The uncertainty of the authenticity of the reporting by the Chinese government, the drastic and quick haphazard measures they took, and the potential that it is more deadly.
Well, just today, the World Health Organization announced that with the spread, to over, I think, 20 countries now, they want to declare an emergency. So with the World Health Organization wanting to declare an emergency, would Amara and Jordan, would you still say that we're fine?
Like it's been mentioned, it's obvious that there's always the potential for danger. Like you said, every 100 years there's been a plague. So is a plague possible? Of course. But I think when you actually look at the numbers, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to panic. I'm not really sure why people seem so committed to the idea that we're, like the human race is at risk. And I also don't understand necessarily what we as individuals could do. Obviously, world governments can do things, but aside from like washing your hands, using hand sanitizer, wearing a mask, which is actually not that great for you, I'm not really sure what you could do to prevent the spread of the illness. So I don't think panic helps anybody.
I also think that while the numbers are high about who's been infected, who's been quarantined, we need to look more at the specifics of the numbers, because while there are some cases of severity, which of course does happen with a disease like this, a lot of these cases that have been reported have symptoms that are honestly no worse than the common cold. And I believe that because of that, those numbers are all added together to make it seem like it's very, very high. But if you look, I believe I was reading it this morning, I believe the number of people actually with a severe case of coronavirus where they could be in danger is just over 2,000, which while still a lot, in the grand scheme of things, is such a small percentage of people that I think our online media culture has just been blowing it out of the water way more than it actually needs to be.
I agree. Like, I'm looking at this, a new study published by the Lancet Medical Journal. So they looked at 99 cases of the virus in the Wuhan hospital, or one of them. I don't know how many there are. And the average age was 55 years. So that's not elderly, but I also think we need to be cognizant of who's most at risk. And it also says that out of that, 49 of them had been exposed to the seafood and animal market. So I think obviously it'll spread further from them, but I think that we need to just be cognizant of who's the most at risk.
Well, even in terms of spread, yesterday I have the CDC coronavirus live global case map. And yesterday, as I said in my intro, it was over 15 countries. It was, I think, about 17, 18. Now we're at 22. So within the last 24 hours, it's spread even further. And I don't know, I think that there's cause for concern because it's not like a regular flu. Even though you mentioned when we were having our discussions about topics to choose for the show, you mentioned that more people die from the common cold, the flu. But in this case, I think it's a little bit different, wouldn't you say?
No, it doesn't seem like the symptoms are too different. And of the 99 that I mentioned before, 51 of them already suffered from a cardiovascular or cerebrovascular disease. So I think, again, we just need to be cognizant of who's the most at risk. And from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like it's that different than just the regular flu.
It's also an important thing to add as well. A lot of countries have shown signs of people being affected. I think we need to look again a little more detail about what's not being shown is that while many countries have had it, it's not a huge percentage in a lot of countries outside of China, as well as is it people who necessarily have a coronavirus or are people who are showing symptoms similar to a coronavirus and due to the mass panic that's been spreading, it's being diagnosed this way.
Yeah, I think the number of countries that, using the number of countries that have a suspected case is kind of ineffective in showing the I guess how bad it could be, because if there's just one or two cases, they could be presumptive, and in a week they find out that it's not that. And we have to say that it does have a 1 to 2 week, I think it was the official number, 1 to 2 week incubation period. So along that time, you could have the virus, show no symptoms whatsoever, and also spread it, which I think is a distinction from the normal influenza. And I think what should be understood is that yes, the influenza happens usually around every winter time once it gets colder, but our system is built to, anticipate that amount of people that get infected and possibly die. But if there's a new virus that's completely different, I don't know if our system, I hope so, has the capability to, take that blow. I also want to mention, we mentioned other diseases. So I have this graph here. It shows how over the course of a number of days since an outbreak, they tracked the number of people that were infected. So the Wuhan virus, or the coronavirus, at this moment in time, has more infected people than the SARS virus had at the same number of days post-outbreak, and the swine flu virus had, afflicted people. So it is growing in the sense that it's faster exponentially than the other two, Chinese or Oriental viruses you can think of. So, just some facts.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So, would you guys say that you're taking more precautions than usual when it comes to this virus, or are you just treating it like it's a common cold?
Common cold.
Yeah, I think we'll agree. I'm just I wash my hands and I use hand sanitizer fairly often, not all the time, but pretty often, and I'm still doing that.
I've made zero lifestyle changes since this disease has
me
happened,
neither.
and unless some serious new information comes to me, I doubt I will make any more changes at all.
I made some changes, but I realized that there are probably things I should have been doing anyway, like not touching anything on public transportation, using hand sanitizer all the time.
Yeah, I think it's more of like the steps you need to take to avoid the coronavirus are called personal hygiene. And if you're not already doing that, that's kind of on you, is my personal thoughts on this.
I would 100% agree with that. Like people who, don't get the flu shot are like freaking out. And it's like, maybe you should take some steps to protect yourself if you're that afraid of
Well, I don't know if
the flu.
the normal flu shot affects this.
Yeah,
Well,
because there's no known solution.
Yeah, my point was that the flu kills tens of thousands of people in North America every year. So you'd think that somebody who was like freaking out over 2 cases, I think, confirmed in Canada would probably protect themselves against something that's proven to be more deadly.
I mean, personally, I would say that I'm taking. So you guys are taking more
No,
precautions?
I'm not.
You're
I haven't changed anything.
You're not,
no.
but you are, Sam.
Yeah.
Jordan, you?
I have
You
made
taking-
0 lifestyle
No?
changes.
Okay. Well, I have made a lifestyle change with Sam. I refuse to take the TTC now. I will be driving downtown
Lucky
every
you.
Thursday.
Not everyone can do that.
I think
I
that's,
know,
it's a
and
personal
that's,
privilege.
Well, yes, I'm lucky in that sense, but it is a change that I've made because I can't get sick. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get this disease.
It's not. You'd be a lot more likely to get the flu or a cold on the TTC than this disease because the people who have it in Canada are quarantined, as far as we know. But
as far as we
yeah,
know,
you're
but
gonna
it's
be
possible to spread.
But I do think
well,
it's
I don't
better.
know if it would spread outside like through a quarantine, but it's possible that other people in the country might have it. These
Whether-
are all maybes.
2-week incubation period, right? So other people could have it, not even know.
Yeah.
But I also
It's
think
possible.
whether that's a necessary precaution or not, it does show how class divide does affect when we have public illnesses like this. Because it's great that you have the option to take not take the subway. I definitely think it's important that if you feel that you could be at risk of that, don't do it. But there are many, many people who don't have that option whatsoever. And if it becomes more serious, that's a huge portion of the population that is now at risk of possibly getting infected because they have to. Again, I don't necessarily believe that we are at risk, but if it comes up, I think we'll start to see how class divide starts to play a huge impact on that.
I think it's also just being aware of your actions. So if you don't need to go out, then don't go out. That's something that everybody can do. Right?
I would disagree.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
disagree. I think
If you
that,
don't no, but if you don't need to go out, if you don't need to go see a group of friends, you don't have to go see them.
Yeah, I think
right?
that fosters hysteria
Agoraphobia.
and panic.
Well,
Okay,
that's
but
what
I think it
that's what
fosters
the Chinese government advocated that people in
In
those
China.
quarantine, those
Yeah,
60
not in
million-
Canada,
yeah,
that's what
I
I'm
know,
saying.
60 million people. So
in China
Theoretically, you could never leave your house and live in a bubble, and you could remain safe from
and never get
diseases.
sick or get hurt
Be a bubble
exactly.
boy.
But
I think that
it's not necessarily living
that-
a lifestyle. Yeah.
No, I think that fosters hysteria. I don't think there's any evidence that Canadians need to not leave their homes
No.
out of fear for the virus. So I think that would be a overreaction to what we know.
So who's to blame for this cause? I mean, the reports say that it's come from the wet markets in China. Is it specific people? Is it a big portion of the population? What do you guys think?
I don't think anybody's
Yeah.
to blame. I don't think anybody contracted the virus and spread it on purpose.
This isn't a form of biological warfare.
Yeah, so I think it's. I don't think anyone's to blame, and I mean, as you could assume, there's people who seem to be now suspicious of all like vaguely Asian people.
But I think
And-
that's just thinly veiled racism.
Oh, it definitely is, but I think that looking for somebody to blame fosters things like that. And I'm sure somebody who would be suspicious or confrontational towards somebody who they think is Chinese is probably not going to be able to tell Asians apart from looking at them. So I don't think that, like I said, I don't think panic helps anything. And I think the panic and hysteria is just causing all of these side effects that don't help anyone.
I do think it's unfortunate that it happened to originate from China because it does give an excuse for people to just be more racist towards Chinese people. I guarantee you if the disease originated in Canada, if it originated in America or a white part of Europe, that people would be like, well, who knows where it comes from? We can't necessarily blame the place, but because it's coming from a place where there's already a lot of racism towards anyways, it becomes an excuse to blame those type of people
Can you-
when they're more so victims than anyone else.
Can you think of any, last we mentioned 100-year diseases. Can you think of any big pandemics? or
Spanish
outbreaks?
influenza.
100 years.
You said in the last 100 years.
Yeah, that was in 1915.
I'm sorry, 5
Sorry,
years off.
95 years. It's a rough margin to
yeah,
get.
just gotta get your numbers right.
Yeah, I'm so sorry it was off by 5 years. And what does that mean? If there's no diseases that have come from Europe in the past?
Sure.
In the past 110 years there are, but not in the past 100, and that's really important. So
Yeah,
what is the point of that?
So, because poor countries tend to have poor infrastructure to deal with, viral or bacterial outbreaks. That's not racism, just fact. You have
no one said anything about racism.
We were just talking about racism.
But I'm not sure what that has to do with
Yeah, I'm
like there are no
confused
poor European
what that's to do with my
countries.
point.
Yeah, they are.
So what does that have to do with? You said that there's no European, like there's no influenzas. And again, there are in the last 110 years, but not
Yeah.
the last 100. So what does the European point have to do with that? You made a point
Because-
about European countries,
yeah.
not about rich countries.
Because it has to do with whether a country's developed or not, which is where more likely an outbreak would occur.
But again, I'm asking what the European point has to do with it.
Because there's a lot more developed countries in Europe than there are developed countries in East Asia.
But there's like Africa's a continent. There was Ebola. So I'm just wondering, like, the point should be about developed and developing countries, not necessarily about European and non-European countries.
Okay, I'm just saying there's more developed countries there, so there's less likely there would be an outbreak.
I think that's the correlation is with the status of the development of the country, not with the
Which a lot of them
ethnic
happen to
makeup of
be
the
in Europe.
country.
That's the only point I was making. I never mentioned ethnicity. I said Europe.
You implied it heavily.
No, I don't. I think that's your own.
I
Attribution.
think to pretend that Europe does not imply European is ridiculous, personally.
There's a lot of people of color that live in Europe.
I didn't say there weren't. I said
I
Europe
think you're
implies
using your own
European.
presumptions here again.
I'm not. You can try
Let's-
to flip it, but I'm not.
Let's stick to what everyone says. Let's keep presumptions aside because what's important is not to assume anything of anyone. So, because you think, Amara and Jordan, because you think that this shouldn't be worried about it, no problem, should travel be okay? Like it shouldn't be avoided?
I
would-
think you should avoid travel to the
Wuhan, yeah.
quarantine city in China. Other than that, no.
I think you can definitely do a little bit of research before you're traveling, and obviously if there's an area where it's been heavily infected, maybe don't go there right now, but I don't think it's enough to cancel any plans. And even if it has been infected a bit, like, do some research. Look where you're staying. Don't go to specific places where there's been a high frequency disease. It's very easy, if you are worried about this, to avoid it.
So the
I
United
agree.
States government completely advised against traveling to China altogether. And
I
that
think
was
Canada did the same thing.
right. So take caution, I guess. Don't travel there.
So would you say don't travel there or travel anywhere? Because, I mean, looking at the list, China, Macau, Taiwan, Australia, Cambodia, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, all of these places have cases.
Yeah, I guess it would be the concentration of the cases would have been the factor that they decided would have been, the travel advisory.
So that's really the only place that you would say, that you would say not to travel to.
I don't think I'd
Yeah.
travel anywhere among the list. Just in general. Like I wouldn't travel to Mexico.
You wouldn't go to Australia?
Australia has one case.
Exactly. You said you wouldn't go anywhere on the list.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was that
it's not
really at the
relevant
very
to the
bottom?
discussion. I'm just curious.
No, let's continue.
Well, personally, I wouldn't go to Australia either, but
Why? Australia
Why's
is
that?
lovely.
it's too hot. I like the cold.
Siberia it is. But moving forward, so do you believe that the coronavirus is worse than is being reported? Do you believe that whistleblower nurse has a point? Do you believe they're being truthful? Do you believe the Chinese government is being truthful, untruthful?
So I think there's a lot. I don't think it would be completely unreasonable to admit, not to necessarily completely trust the Chinese government. They've not, they've given us reasons to not trust them in the past.
You were just mentioning the
So-
Uyghurs they have in
Exactly.
education camps, and
So-
they don't have the best reputation.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. I think that completely. There's a reason not to trust them, but I also don't necessarily think that there's accurate evidence to believe that there's 90,000 cases. The nurse didn't really provide any evidence for that. She just said, "I'm a nurse," and there's 90,000 cases. So
Could have been anyone.
yeah.
It's-
And did you
it's-
count 90,000 people? I'm not sure how you got to that number. So I think you can definitely, safely assume that there might be more cases than China's reporting, but I don't know if you should believe a random nurse who filmed a video and said she was a nurse.
I also think, piggybacking off of that in today's culture, with how fast information spreads over the internet, you're going to get reactions in quicker time than you ever would in the past with other outbreaks that might have happened. So because of that, in the past, you would have had to wait to hear about a newspaper, then you wait till you see someone to talk about it. People have more time to process and to react and to form their own opinions about it. In today's culture, the minute you see about it, you do a quick Google search online and you have every single person's listing their reaction one by one. Whether it's intentional or not, it helps form your opinion. And people online love to overreact about things. They love to jump to conclusions. They love it. And whether you're trying to or not, you're going to have your opinion formed by that, and you're going to usually have a worse reaction than you necessarily would have before the internet culture.
And people, like, media sources are aware of the internet culture, so they're trying to get stories out as fast as possible, which I'm sure doesn't lend itself to very accurate vetting.
And no one wants to read a story that's like, it's not that big of a deal. No one wants to worry about that because that won't generate views for the newspaper.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
exactly.
They want stories being like, with shocking headlines that you need to be concerned. And then if you read the article through, it's not that you need to be concerned. It's just a catchy headline, but the sad news is most people don't read past the headline.
Well, let's actually, in terms of opinion, look at what our poll opinion is, the overarching opinion. We actually asked our Facebook viewers the same question. Do you believe that the coronavirus is worse than is being reported? Sam, what are the results?
So 24% said yes, this is SARS 2.0, and 76% said no, stop panicking.
And how many people voted in total?
So 51 people voted in total.
Okay, it's a pretty decent number. So generally, 70% believe that it's fine, just like you guys, whereas the other 30% would, I guess, agree with Sam and myself. On that note, you guys would say this is not SARS 2.0 then, right?
I would say it's not SARS 2.0, but SARS killed less people, like I've said, than the flu kills every year. So, I mean, if it's as deadly as the flu, that would be worse than it being SARS 2.0.
I also think, like, the polls are a reasonably small sample size. It's hard to necessarily gauge a public reaction.
Hey.
Well,
It's true.
I will be
You.
practical. It's because
It is.
you can't. 75% of a 50-person poll does not necessarily indicate public reaction.
Of course not, but this
No,
is
this is-
our
but I would say,
audience's
yes,
point of
I'll-
view.
Which is a very valued.
It makes me feel
Very
good at
valued.
least that the viewing
Don't
audience.
trash our
Let me-
audience's
let me-
opinions.
Let me
Off to a
retract.
good
I don't think it was trashing
No,
it.
let me retract. Actually, what I was saying is I'm very glad at least that the viewing audience of the Raben Report has at least what I view as a sensible opinion on the matter
rational
to
opinion.
not overly freak out. I'm just saying, just because our viewers are reasonable in this matter does not mean the rest of the world will react.
nobody
in such
said
a
that.
calm.
Breaking news. All Canadians think SARS 2.0. Run and hide.
I'm just saying that I think if we're going to look at polls, we need to look at larger polls. It's just my opinion.
Of course, when we're talking... Okay, well, we're going to... hold on. We're going to stay here for a second because it's very important for our viewers to be able to voice their concerns, and nobody ever mentioned that this is the overarching opinion of
course
Canada.
not. Of course
but
not.
we ask the question so that our audience can have a say in it. So I think we have to respect what they think,
Yes.
and whether or not... We don't use this poll to judge all of Canada, but we have to respect their viewpoint.
I agree. I just think we should take sample size into effect when we're discussing it. And just make
in
sure-
general conversations, but in this case, we're talking specifically about our Facebook poll.
Okay.
So, what measures are being taken by Canadian health authorities to deal with this threat to Canadians?
So they quarantined I believe, 2 people in Toronto that were symptomatic, which means they have symptoms that are expressed. And then the Canadian government contacted people that were in a vicinity of those 2 people in recent time. I guess that was their immediate family, and people that were on the plane ride that I believe came in directly from Wuhan, but I might be incorrect with that. And then in Montreal, I heard about that case briefly, and I haven't really heard it in the news again, so I really don't know. But yeah, general quarantine among the symptomatic people and the people that might have it, the asymptomatic people, they were contacted, and I don't know what happened from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of... So we're obviously generally doing things right and protecting our citizens, but Sam, you and I were actually talking about this before the show, and I'll open it up to obviously Amara and Jordan. What do you think the Canadian government is doing or should be doing about Canadian citizens stuck in Wuhan, China?
I think the best thing they could do is fly them over on chartered planes. I don't know if that's feasible, if that's been done before, and then place them in immediate quarantine in the best possible facility. I think that they have an obligation to do that because they're Canadians.
What about people with dual citizenship?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. If I agree that you might think like if they lived in China their whole life, but if I'm someone in China and I have Canadian citizenship and I'm seeing Canadians being flown out of China, I'm gonna say, "Hey, I'm a Canadian. Get me out of here!" Like,
Yeah, but the condition would be that you be put immediately into quarantine. like in a medical facility in Canada.
To be tested, just to make sure you don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
health-
reasonable, I
which
think.
health-
If they're flying you out there, you got to take the
yeah, that would
precautions.
absolutely be.
But do you think people who live in China with dual citizenship would get access to this? Do you think it'd be fair, or do
yeah,
you
they're
think they'd be
Canadians.
left? Oh, even if they've never lived, they were born in Canada, moved to China, you still think they'd be allowed?
Well,
to
if
be-
they want, we're not forcing them out. If they're Canadian citizens and they want to leave, whether they have symptoms or not, I think. Well, I believe if they had symptoms, probably the Chinese government would want to hold them. But
But I think this is limited to people who traveled there, got
yeah,
in the mix
that's
of
my
the
belief, too.
virus. I don't think it would. I don't think because they did send a plane to Wuhan. I don't think it is for people who lived in China for 20 odd years, but they do have Canadian citizenship. I don't think they're going to be accepted to hop on that flight. But should they be?
I don't know. I think it will definitely cause at least a media outcry if they're left behind and they're vocal about it, because some people may think like I'm equally as Canadian as a person, even if I don't live in Canada. I have my citizenship. Why am I stuck here when they get flown out?
Fair. Amara, what do you think about this whole situation?
I think it's unfortunate for the people, especially people who've traveled there. Obviously, no one knew this was going to happen. I think the idea of chartering a plane and quarantining them back in Canada, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, I think that would be good if Canada's not willing to do that. I just think it's really unfortunate for them.
It's bad place, bad timing. It's
Yeah,
really,
very
it's
bad
really-
timing.
It's really not a lot more than that.
Well, I mean, Canada obviously canceled all their flights. They started with flights just to Beijing and Wuhan, and now they canceled all their flights to China in the next little while. How is this affecting the Chinese economy as well as trading partners with China?
I definitely think if we haven't seen a huge impact yet, it's going to come. China's a major trading company, as far as I know. And I think countries are going to be maybe not stopping altogether, but at least a little more hesitant about trading until they know. Because I think there's a lot of confusion still about where this disease comes from and how it spreads besides human interaction. So I do believe that it's definitely going to start to affect the Chinese trading market soon, and not in a positive way. I think they're going to lose a lot of trades, at least reasonably soon.
I mean, just looking at the stock market, on Monday, everything crashed because people were worried about the coronavirus. It picked up afterwards, of course, but there was obviously fear in that. So you think that everything's going to be generally okay in a little bit in terms of the stock market?
I think they're going to lose. I think they're going to go down, at least, because like I said, people aren't aware completely. While it's been talked about how it spread through handshakes like that, I think the general public is more suspicious than what they read online, and people are going to be afraid. At least major trading companies, I think, are going to be a little nervous about importing stock, and so especially anything that comes from animal products. I don't know how much of that necessarily we get from China, but if anyone can comment on that, I can see people who receive companies and stuff that receive stuff from China being at least hesitant of what might be contained within their merchandise.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. And I could see people in North America and just other countries being wary of Chinese products.
Yeah. Sam, being a business student?
Sure. I think you can attribute the initial shock to the stock. It was the whole stock market in China, right? In
No,
Shanghai?
it was just the general stock market, like New York Stock Exchange
Okay.
fell, TSX fell.
Sure. I think you could definitely attribute that to just the initial hype or shock, and people didn't know really any facts. There would probably be, over time, as is properly understood, a more realistic change to the market would occur. So buy in the dip, which probably a lot of people did because it went back up.
Fair. That's a lesson for the stock market and trading, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy low, sell high.
Well, with all that being said, what do you guys think the future of this virus is? Do you think there will be a cure? Do you think it's going to spread like wildfire? Do you think it's going to be solved within the next couple weeks, maybe a month? A lot of people are comparing what's going on now to the movie Contagion because it originated from food malpractice or, unsanitary food use and consumption, and then it killed Gwyneth Paltrow and it spread to 2 million people.
No.
So a lot of people are saying that kind of the story is the same, but do you think that we'll be able to circumvent that and change the course of history?
Well, I think our number one priority has to be protecting Gwyneth Paltrow at all costs. But if I had to give my honest opinion about this, I think we're going to keep hearing about it for a couple more weeks in the news cycle. There's not going to be much more, at least outbreaks here in Canada, and then it's going to slowly lose its place in the media cycle, and we're not going to hear about it again.
Yeah, I mean, if SARS and the swine flu are any indication, it's probably going to die out. I don't think there'll be a cure, but I don't think it's going to spread like wildfire, at least in Canada.
Did you know the swine flu killed 500,000 people?
I did not.
I didn't know either.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Apparently, the number was, once it was ended, and the initial number, I think, was 21,000. But I read an article that said, like, the range was between something like 250 to 560.
But again,
Pretty big range.
And also going
It's like
off
double.
Yeah.
Because it was in, I'm assuming because it was in China, and the numbers might have been unreliable.
So it killed from 250,000 to 560,000?
Yeah.
That's a big
So you
range.
can't really say that it killed 500,000 people. We don't know exactly
I
how
saw
many
that
people
number,
it
and then I saw another number cited in an article, and that one only said 500. So
And I also think, going back on something that Amara said much earlier in the show today, that looking at those numbers, we can't actually look at like what pre-existing conditions they might have had necessarily before that might have impacted that number. Because I think that number is not 500,000 people who were completely healthy and then got swine flu and died. That doesn't seem realistic to me.
Yeah, I think I think we should be very, very scared when viruses start making otherwise young, healthy people drop dead.
I think the youngest was 30-something, was in China.
And for the coronavirus?
No, it was a Chinese national in France, I believe.
I think you can, of course, point out one case, but I think, again, generally we need to look at people's pre-existing conditions. People with compromised immune systems, babies, and the elderly tend to be the ones that die the most from this. And I think I would start to be very scared when, like, otherwise healthy people just get completely knocked out. I think that's when we need to be very afraid of an epidemic. But even saying that, I think the moves the Canadian government's taken, like quarantining people, have been are pretty good and will probably be effective.
Something to note, sorry, Elliot. In Wuhan, there's a virology lab, the only kind in China, and they study viruses much like the coronavirus. And I saw an article, I think, from 2015, where they were beginning to study highly infectious in a medical, supposedly a medical environment. They were studying this coronavirus, which is just influenza. But interesting, the only such virus virology lab in China, and it's where it starts. That's not, that's just a theory. This is interesting.
Yeah, I think I've read people saying that it was patented or that it was stolen from a lab in Canada. I think the conspiracy theories about foul play are really dangerous, and I think that especially makes people look suspiciously at Chinese people, and I think that that's dangerous. And again, I just think it spreads this mass hysteria and panic, like we're under biological warfare, and I don't think that that's effective for anything.
Yeah, I think, again, it's thinly veiled racism is essentially what it is. Like, I can't see
anyone mentioned.
No, not what you're saying.
Okay.
No, I mean, these conspiracy theories essentially are excuses for people who already have a predisposition against people who are from Chinese descent.
Chinese government officials.
Pardon?
Yeah, but if that were the case, it would be people involved in the Chinese government or in that lab, right?
That did it, but I'm talking about the hysteria
like
of people
spreading it online.
Chinese civilians.
Whether it happened or not, that's up for debate. What we're saying, at least what I'm saying, is that the people who are spreading it online as these mass conspiracies, it's usually them who are overcompensating for some sort of racist tendencies that they might have.
Would you say that's generally what's going on? Because you look at, again, this nurse that posted the video, she's Chinese. I don't think she hates Chinese
but
people.
We don't. What do we really know about this nurse that posted this? I mean,
we know that she took a video, that she said she was a nurse, and that she said that there's 90,000 cases.
Do we see any
she's
documented evidence of
the video takes place? You can hear
because I haven't seen this video.
Yeah.
But I want to ask this: is there anything in that video that proves that she's a nurse or proves at all what she's saying is accurate?
She's wearing nurse's garb.
Oh, my bad. I'm so sorry.
Well,
She's wearing
Jordan,
nurse's garb.
let him finish.
I mean, interruptions have been happening all show.
Yeah, well, you're interrupting me now. So.
And you interrupted me earlier.
So we're
Shut
going to... okay.
So polite.
So again, the Raben report. Samuel.
It's excused, I guess.
Right.
Samuel.
So, like I was saying, she has a nurse's garb on, and she seems distressed, which could be an act, and then there's background noise. It seems like people are yelling. That could be edited in. But yeah, that's the video.
There were other videos that surfaced about like showing the quarantine tents being built, the hospitals being built. And right now I'm not verifying her claims. My question is, though, do you believe that the majority of people the majority of people that are saying these conspiracy theories, as you said, are doing it for the purposes of masked racism, or do you believe that there are a lot of people, the majority of which are just generally scared about this?
I'm sure there are some people who are legitimately scared for no other reason that they're scared of diseases, and that's a perfectly legitimate thing. And I also, let me just retract, I don't think there's anyone being like, well, I mean, there could be people going like, ha ha ha, I'm being racist by making these things. I think it's people who have racist tendencies who see an outbreak from China and now they start thinking this is the end of the world, the Chinese people are doing it. I don't think they're necessarily trying to be racist on purpose, but I think if it exists there already, it will only be furthered by what's happening here. If that makes sense.
Interesting. Sam, what would you say?
It's just I saw that I guess perspective in Canadian media a lot. It's just interesting that that's the immediate focus. Like, oh yeah, there's people dying. Racism.
I think it's interesting that we hear about a virus that's broken out and people immediately start being suspicious of just like random Asian people that they
And
see
that's stupid.
in public.
Well,
So I think that's where
what I'm talking about.
the focus comes from. That
Uh-huh.
of course people are empathetic about people dying, but I think the idea that like we hear about this virus and there's 2 cases in Canada and now like an Asian person coughs on the subway and everybody's scared.
That's
I
like-
think that's what they're talking
That's a
about.
meme. Like,
But
it was funny.
whether it's intended
I
for
mean,
serious purposes or not,
it's
it's being
happening.
spread online constantly, whether in the form internet memes are sadly become a way that people receive news online sometimes. Like, it's not a good thing, but it happens. And there are some people, some uninformed people who are only getting their news from online culture, online news, stuff like that, who are seeing all these things about Chinese people, especially Chinese Canadians, and that will impact how you view someone's life. Yes, the dying, people being infected, it's horrible, but that's not to take away from the excuse that it gives people to
And
act
but
like
I
that.
highly
think it's
doubt
a
that
joke.
somebody
If you get
who
Hold on, we're gonna go to
sorry.
Mark.
I highly doubt that somebody who thinks that, like, who would be suspicious of a Chinese or somebody that they assume is Chinese on the street, like I said, is going to be educated enough or even be able to tell the difference between somebody who's Filipino or Korean or, you know, Thai. So yeah, I think that's where it's coming from, that people are seeing these attitudes spread.
Just in regards to your point, Jordan, you said these people who are getting their news online are uninformed. Do you think that they're uninformed because they're getting their news online?
I think
Because
that-
a lot of news is consumed online generally.
I do, but I think it's looking at what online.
Yeah, I think he meant like
Obviously,
memes and
I mean,
Twitter
like people
and
going
stuff.
through like Twitter feeds or Tumblr feeds or Instagram pages. Maybe not Instagram more so than anything else, but people who aren't getting from actual news sources that are doing journalistic evidence, but rather personal opinion and bias being presented as news. And I think that's an important distinction with getting your information from online. And the people I was talking about were the people who are receiving personal biases as news. Not to say that major news corporations don't show biases all the time, but I think it's a lot more thinly veiled that in like Twitter and stuff like that.
And it's also like if you're getting news from memes and like trending Twitter topics and tweets rather than like actual news sites. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with reading a news story online rather than a newspaper, but I think it's the source that you're reading your information from.
Exactly.
For sure, but a lot of tweets come from journalists, come from people within the area, and I think news generally, anybody can be a journalist, air quotes, because anybody can get their phone and report something. I mean, you look at, for example, SixBuzz on Instagram. They actually report a lot of things before I see it.
Did
on-
they
on
post
media.
that there were 2 people at Ryerson that had it? Was that on 6Buzz?
Yeah,
That was
an
too.
edited
It wasn't-
Instagram.
Yeah, I
edited
know it
version,
was
yeah.
edited, and that was my point. That
Yeah.
everyone can be a journalist with
Yeah.
social media and a phone, but you still need to be aware of the sources you're getting your news from. Because while 6Buzz might actually qualify as journalism, and they do disseminate a
Yeah.
lot of news, they're not a reputable news source.
For
and
sure.
things like that get spread, and then of course that's going to spread more panic.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not saying that SixBuzz is my primary source of news. Never.
God.
But Sam,
It's interesting that you said about like Twitter and how breaking news sometimes disseminates that way. It's funny whenever you see like a video, something just breaking news, like within the last 10 minutes on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, anywhere. You always see journalists in the comments or in the replies, whatever it's called. Oh, hi, I'm from ABC News. Can we have your permission to use this? So
I wouldn't say you
There-
always see that. I would say you see it in certain cases when they get a more first-hand story on that.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if there's like a breaking news, say there's a shooting somewhere in the U.S. and someone took a video with their phone and posted it on Twitter, you'll see sometimes people saying from the news agencies, "Oh, I'm from blah blah blah. Can I use this?" So there's I guess there's
I think that's just
crowdsourcing of, information and current events, which is interesting. You're right. It's a recent development with social media.
But I also think there's a distinction with what you're saying. Like that type of person wanting firsthand footage of someone who was there is a reliable source because they were someone who's now been proven to be at the event wherever this took place. For if you're using the example of a shooting, someone who's there with a camera videotaping it is a very reliable source in this case because they were there with a camera and usually have evidence on footage. Going all the way back now to, who had the case in the video posted by the nurse. Yeah, I can't say words. The case, there's no discernible evidence, at least from what you guys are saying to me, in the video that proves that they were a nurse, stuff like that. And I think that's the difference, is making sure if you are looking at news online and seeing some of it, it's having that discernible eye to be able to tell what is just online, not garbage, but what is online fabrication and what is online news coming from credible sources that either had some sort of relevancy to the situation or rather are just trained in journalism in the sense that they can report a story.
Yeah, and that one video is the one that Elliot's talking about that the nurse said, it was 90,000 instead. But there are other videos that don't, specify, I'm an official and this is the number. But there's interesting videos where people are just, keeling over in the street.
Yeah.
And they're like, they have a tarp or something thrown over them. And there's like blood, and people are wearing a mask. I saw something interesting. Do I have time to mention it quickly?
Yeah.
In the periphery villages around Wuhan, there was, in these small villages, there were people with signs and then like swords and spears. And I got someone to translate. They were saying, no outsiders. I guess they were worried that infected people were going to come into their village. And I saw a video, this guy in like a moped driving on a single road. These are small villages, single road in, single road out. And he's driving up into the people, guarding the village. And they have like spears and they're pushing the guy away on the moped and yelling at him like, go away, we don't want you. I don't know. I hope that was not from this recent event, but if that's actually happening, I have no way to confirm that. I just saw the video and the people explaining what the signs meant, but that was to me really like surreal, like people using medieval weapons to push away people on mopeds.
Yeah, I think all of the frenzy around it is just really showcases how dangerous I think the internet can be. There's not a lot of context always, like in a 10-30 second video you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, and anyone can say that they're anyone. So I think we should just be careful about what information we're getting and what we choose to believe.
And that's where we're going to end the show today on that excellent note. That was our that was our show for this week. Thank you to everyone that tuned in and that messaged us live on our Season 8 premiere. Jordan, how did you feel about your first episode?
I had a wonderful time being part of it, and I'm looking forward to many more shows.
Amazing. We are looking forward to many more as well. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, same day, same time, same people. Have a great day, everyone.